Okay, well, welcome everybody, and thank you for taking the time to join us. I'm Lynn, and this is Jim, and we write 6 cruising guides to the Salish Sea, and we've just introduced our newest guide to the west coast of Vancouver Island. So when we first did this presentation on cruising Puget Sound was last year at the boat show, and it was titled Cruising Puget Sound, What Are You Waiting For? But of course, now we all are waiting for the same thing, the border to open. And so now it's Cruising Puget Sound Worth Waiting For. So the idea for this presentation came to us after being asked all the time by Canadian boaters why anybody would want to cruise in Puget Sound. It's just urban sprawl and fenced off beaches and factories.
And everyone loves cruising to remote places. But the pursuit of wilderness is not the reason you would cruise Puget Sound. That doesn't mean there aren't lovely parks with some amazing hiking trails and lots of wildlife. But there's nothing off-grid about it. It's not the Broughtons or the west coast of Vancouver Island. I've never cruised the canals of Europe, but maybe the experience is something like that.
It's what I call easy cruising. Things are just easy. I don't have to plan for 2 weeks of meals and try and get everything onto the boat. I can have a steak with lovely fresh vegetables from the farmer's market and deli cheese and locally made crackers washed down by local craft beer. So for me, it's an opportunity to have a bit of a foodie experience, which is a great holiday. Now, don't get me wrong, I love the Broughtons, I love Desolation Sound, but today I'm making a case for a different kind of cruising holiday. This is the farmer's market in Olympia, which is just minutes from the dock. Okay, so what is exactly considered Puget Sound? At the top of the map, you can see Anacortes, which is just over 100 miles from Olympia, way down in the south there as the crow flies. And about 17,000 years ago, a massive glacier bulldozed its way south. And it was so thick and deep that it almost covered the Cascadia and the Olympic Mountains on either side. And underneath was gravel and rocks that ground the terrain below. So the glacier crept down as far as Olympia before it surrendered to the big thaw. And as it retreated, the ground underneath slowly rebounded, rising hundreds of feet, which is why the shoreline is mostly sand and mud.
When we first thought about doing this talk, we planned to suggest routes you could take if you had 2, 3, or 4 weeks of holidays, but we found we just couldn't sum things up like that. It depends on your idea of a holiday. Do you like cities? Do you stay in marinas? Do you prefer to anchor? You can spend weeks in the Sound and spend little money, or you can spend a hell of a lot. We'll just take you to some places that we like and hope it answers some of your questions along the way. The first thing you have to do is clear customs. That intimidates some boaters. It depends where you're coming from, but for most of us, the easiest places to check in are Friday Harbor or Rush Harbor, or maybe Point Roberts Marina near Victoria. Vancouver, near Vancouver. Closer to Puget Sound are the ports of entry at Anacortes and Port Townsend. We have found Rush Harbor to be crazy busy on Canadian long weekends. And at that time, Friday Harbor is preferable. This is the Camp Sant Marina at Anacortes. Different U.S. Customs docks have different procedures. Typically, you tie up and everyone but the captain remains on board. The captain takes all boat and crew papers to a customs phone or office to report in. If it's your first visit of the year, you'll pay $19 for a cruising license that is good for the calendar year. And if you and anyone else on board has a Nexus card, you can always call in just as you're entering the United States, and it makes things much easier.
Okay, so this brings us to poop. So all of Puget Sound and the San Juan Islands, right up to the Canadian border, is a no discharge zone. So if you don't have a composting toilet, you've got to have a holding tank or at least a porta potty. I don't think that this would pass inspection. And this map shows the no discharge zone in pink. But free and easy to use pump outs are available at all the marinas and all the city and park docks. But you also have to disable your ability to flush overboard and then prove that you have done so if asked by authorities. So there's a website called pumpoutwashington.org that lists the 4 ways to prove that you cannot pump overboard. And they aren't complicated.
So let's cruise down into the Sound. This is the lighthouse at Point Wilson near Port Townsend. It's at the entrance to Admiralty Inlet, which is likely to be your first landfall if sailing from Vancouver Island. It's a great area with lots of sheltered anchorages. This is looking north to Point Wilson and beyond to the San Juan Islands. Here is also Fort Wharton, built in 1902 to protect Puget Sound from invasion by sea. It's now a park with mooring buoys across the bay. And here we are in a mooring ball just south of the wharf. In Puget Sound, there are lots of marine buoys or marine parks with mooring buoys, floats, and docks. Buoys cost $15 a night for boats up to 45 feet. If you're planning to spend any time down there, purchase a season pass at a cost of about $5 a foot. In our case, it paid for itself in 14 nights. You can buy a pass online and have it sent to you before leaving. This anchorage, however, can get very rolly from passing freighters and ferries, so don't leave fine glassware out on the salon table.
Do we have any fine glassware?
No, fine plastic. There's easy bus access into Port Townsend, or it can be walked in less than an hour if that's your thing. I didn't do such a good job here of timing our departure from this dinghy dock. I think we went for ice cream to wait out the tide.
We did.
Yeah.
And Port Townsend is a lovely town with an old-time nautical feel. There's lots of moorage with 2 large marinas at either end of the city, and then the historic Wharf Street linking them together. And there's also several public docks you can tie up at and places that you can anchor with good holding. Provisioning is great in town. There's supermarkets and Saturday farmers market. So just across from Port Townsend is Fort Flagler State Park, which has good anchorage and buoys and a small park dock. And it showcases preserved gun batteries. There's a military hospital, as well as restored homes of officers. And there's about a dozen walking trails in the park with beautiful views across to the Olympic and Cascade Mountains.
And here we are at the south end of Port Townsend Bay, and where you find Port Hadlock. The marina here has little transient moorage, but there is a good anchorage nearby and a public dock with trails ashore and some traditional marine businesses that are fun to explore. And nearby is the Port Townsend Channel. You can take it to the southern reaches of Admiralty Inlet. If your vertical clearance exceeds 18 meters, though, depending on the tide, you'll likely have to go around.
And it's not that far to Port Ludlow, where the marina there is somewhat famous for holding group events like rendezvous for boat makers and yacht clubs. It's also an excellent anchorage with over 20 miles of hiking trails in the area. And for golfers who stay at the marina, they'll appreciate the free shuttle bus to the golf club. So if you do like to golf, there's lots of marinas in Puget Sound that offer shuttles to nearby courses.
And there I am, climbing the mast on a calm day. We started installing mast steps at home in Victoria. We ran out of time, so we took the project with us. As Lynn was saying, Puget Sound is easy. If you have boat projects, take them with you. Do them when you have time.
And who doesn't have boat projects?
That's right. And that goes for electrical work, too. We had a mess of rewiring to do. The beauty of Puget Sound is the availability of parts. And even parts I never knew we'd need
Yeah.
were never far away.
I wish that I'd taken a shot of what it looks like now. It's beautiful with our new panel. Okay, so heading south from Port Ludlow, Mount Rainier becomes a majestic presence as you pass Point No Point, which takes us to Kingston, about halfway between Port Ludlow and Poulsbo. It's a small town that gets very busy every hour or so with the arrival of the ferry to and from Edmonds.
Kingston has some free mooring buoys next to the ferry dock. I spent a couple of nights alone here a few years ago. It's a lovely place, very relaxed, so I insisted we stop here on our last trip down. Well, the view was nice, but it was miserable with night winds and ship wake, and I'm not sure Lynn has forgiven me since
It's a
that.
good thing they were free.
Yeah, that's right. But it's convenient because it does break up a pretty long stretch of coastline, and you can opt for the protected marina. They had electric cars that were free to use for provisioning in town. Apparently, COVID ended that, but hopefully the service will resume after the pandemic. And moving south, across from Seattle is Bainbridge Island. The waterways behind Bainbridge Island are collectively known as Port Orchard. This includes to the north Liberty Bay and the city of Poulsbo,
Which is a charming town with a Scandinavian flair, and it's I think it's known as Little Norway. And it's a very walkable town with art galleries and museums, bakery, there's a chandlery, and I think 5 craft breweries. So many cruisers, but not us, measure in Anchorage by the number of beer and craft beer and ciders that are on tap locally. So a 120-year-old church overlooks this very picturesque waterfront. And here we are, anchored off the marina, and we were entertained daily by these resident seals. So the second Saturday of the month, at least pre-COVID, they have a gallery hop. You can stroll down the streets and meet with the artists in their galleries.
And just south of Poulsbo, in the channel out of Liberty Bay, is Keyport, home to a small marina with transient docks and a naval station where they design and build undersea weapons. There's an undersea museum here that's pretty interesting as well. And just south of Keyport is an area about 3 miles long that is off limits to pleasure boats when the Navy is playing target practice under the water. You can pass by Bainbridge Island and Port Orchard in a couple hours, or spend weeks here. There's much to explore in so many anchorages. And in case you're wondering what all the squares are on our chartlets, they're taken from pages in our guides. The squares and labels are actually buttons and links to other pages.
So I'm going to play a short video that explains how they work, and then you'll see what they're all about. It's not the Puget Sound guide, it's the new guide we have to the west coast of the island, but you'll get the idea. I have to talk fast, so I actually taped it too fast. So, okay, when you hit the text or the box, it takes you to that location, and then you can zoom in, see what's on shore, trailhead, that kind of thing. There's the information about the dock or the mooring buoys in this case. That's the main menu button. Takes you to the front page. You can change sections. So there's section E, Puget Sound. You want to see what's at Walters Cove. There's what's on shore, the docks. And then that icon takes you back to the beginning of the section. So back to section E. You can look at another anchorage, Dixie Cove. You can also scroll through them. And again, that's the main menu, which also has links to things like wind and weather, provisioning, tides and currents. So that's basically how they work. Okay, so let's skip down to Sinclair Inlet and the communities of Bremerton and Port Orchard. They sit on opposite sides of the inlet, and they're both pleasant places to wander around, and both also have interesting museums. So this is downtown Port Orchard, and this is part of a waterfront walk in Bremerton, where there's a Free Navy Museum that focuses on the region's naval history and what it's like to live on aircraft carriers and submarines. Big attraction is also the USS Turner Joy, which is being converted into yet another museum.
And back out in the main sound is Blake Island. It's a lovely park, almost 500 acres in size, across from Seattle. And the entire island is parkland surrounded by 20 marine buoys with transient marina off the park village. There's lovely beaches and miles of walking trails, making it a really popular spot.
Okay, so we'll move now to Eagle Harbor on the eastern shore of Bainbridge Island, which is another favorite anchorage of ours. This is the view from our kayak looking out over the anchorage. And there's also 2 marinas and a public dock that takes visiting boats. So we generally end up spending way more time here than planned, like sometimes weeks. There's a really great city pool. We swim laps, so we like that. And you go for a hot tub and have long, hot, untimed showers. There's also a movie theater. There's a library with Wi-Fi, a supermarket, chandlery, place to get ice cream. And then there's the ferry that leaves every hour for the trip over to Seattle, which is great. And this is the view of Seattle from the anchorage. So at night, that's really a lovely view. And yes, we were there. The Pickleball Founders Tournament in 2019.
It's an important slide.
He wanted to take it out. So little known fact, back in 1965, 3 young fathers invented the sport of pickleball on Bainbridge Island. And on the south shore, there's a Japanese exclusion memorial, which was built to remember the 227 Japanese who were forcibly displaced from the island during World War II. Kind of a moving spot. So this was a close encounter that I had with a seal. He was pretty curious, and he followed me along for quite a while I was rowing. And I took my backpack off and got my phone out to take pictures, and he became interested in my oar, swatting at it several times and sort of chasing it and playing with it while I paddled. And then he started taking hunks out of it. So then I got a little nervous because he had huge teeth and claws, and when he jumps into the dinghy, I'm literally sunk. Okay, so this is Winslow Wharf in Eagle Harbor. There's a chandlery and a restaurant bar. It's very, very pretty.
And the ferry over to Seattle from Bainbridge Island is an easy way to visit the big city and avoid the expense of a marina stay there. This photo was taken in the Fremont area of Seattle, which has a funky atmosphere with lots of fun shops and restaurants. And fishery supply is also in Fremont if you're looking for a boat bit to fix or replace something.
We're there a lot.
Yeah, we're there. There a lot. While here and elsewhere in the Sound, we used Uber. I suppose most people know this, but for Uber and other services that run off apps, you'll want cell service. If you don't want to pay for roaming, you can buy US SIM cards online or from supermarkets or Walmarts or wherever. Unlimited data and minutes starts at about $50 a month.
Yeah, it was worth having.
Yeah.
So Ballard is another fun part of Seattle. After a long day, walking around, shopping, exploring, you can get some excellent northern Thai food or spicy Mexican. And, that's not happening when you feel like it in the Broughtons, right? And neither is a pint of local craft beer and a game of Yahtzee in a Viking tavern. We've spent a lot of time wandering around Ballard, and including this massive consignment store, which is fascinating. So I wanted to buy that rhinoceros head and put it on the bow of the boat, but Jim said no.
Another site in Ballard, especially for boaters, is the Chittenden locks, also known as the Ballard locks. They bring boats up from Puget Sound to the freshwater canal that leads inland to Lake Union and Lake Washington. And if you're planning to take your boat up through the locks, which we highly recommend, it's a good place to spend a couple hours visiting the locks by land, so you can watch boats go through and see how it works. You can pick up a boater's brochure and attend a how-to seminar in their little workshop there, and it will ease any concerns you might have had. And this map shows the ship canal from Puget Sound through the locks and into the inland lakes. And here we are arriving at the locks by boat. There are two locks, one small and one large, and you might be directed to either one. Traffic lights and loudspeakers control the flow of boats. Just do as you're told. Information on the gear you need for either lock, such as ropes and fenders, is available online from cruising guides or from the material you picked up at the visitor center. In this photo, we're in the small lock tied to the wall, waiting for the lock to fill. And presto, now we're preparing to exit into the lakes. The boats in the distance are waiting their turn. Strong currents enter the lock when the gates open, so don't untie until you're told to do so. It's an adventure and it's fun, even with an audience.
So from the locks, you enter the Lake Washington Ship Canal and pass under some fixed and lifting bridges on the way into the lakes. So the vertical clearance of each bridge is on government charts. So you just have to know the distance from the water line to the highest point on your boat, such as the top of your VHF antenna. And this is a view of the canal from a footpath along it that we walked while we were in Ballard. The bridges are closed during rush hours, but you request an opening outside of those times by signaling with your horn. And along the canal, there's float homes. And once you get under that bridge, you're really in the heart of downtown Seattle.
And this is a stock photo of South Lake Union, which is very much worth a visit. There's usually a lot of stuff happening along the water here. It's the home of the Center for Wooden Boats. It's also a bit of a techie district with blocks of office buildings for Google and Amazon. There's daytime moorage at several public docks and along a wall, which you can tie to overnight. But for most of us, it's onto Lake Washington, where there's some really nice anchorages and marine parks, as well as some pleasant marinas to go to. One of our favorite destinations is Kirkland on the northeast shore of the lake. The marina here is well kept, and it's a great community for boaters to explore on foot.
And lift some weights, I think.
The new floating bridge across Lake Washington allows boaters with masts as high as 70 feet to pass under and visit the south half of the lake. And a splendid anchorage is at Andrews Bay. If you've never seen 20 or 30 boats rafted together, it's a pretty common sight here, though it's seldom overrun with overnighters. The bay has an adjoining park with trails and play areas for kids. Bus service nearby will take you quickly into downtown Seattle. One thing we really enjoy here is swimming off the boat. The lake water is much warmer.
And of course, there are also several great marinas in Seattle. This is the Elliott Bay Marina, where we stayed for a few days this summer. The one drawback is its location. It's a bit removed from downtown Seattle. However, it's only a 20-minute walk to a grocery store and the bus stop that will take you into town. And there's also always Uber. So we both really enjoy the heat, and it was nice to have some while we were in Seattle. You don't think it's ever been that warm in Desolation Sound.
No. Don't diss Desolation Sound. And this is an example of local weather. This cloud hung over Seattle's downtown skyline one morning as we set off from Eagle Harbor. I think we should touch on weather a bit. You can get marine forecasts two ways. The forecasts on the VHF weather channels are, like in Canada, updated 4 times a day. If you have cell or Wi-Fi, there's a web page with the same marine forecast. The beauty of the website is the forecast is instantly there. On the radio, it can be a long wait for forecasts to cycle through. And weather in Puget Sound can be pretty tricky. There are 3 forecast areas in the south part of the sound, and they can have and they're pink, green, and blue, and they can have quite different forecasts. We heed them all, especially weather warnings. When we anchor near the borders of these areas, we assume we'll get hit by the worst forecast, and so far it's worked pretty well.
Okay, now we're heading south in Colville's Passage towards Gig Harbor. It's August, and of course there's fog, but we find, it's no problem if we stay close to the shore. You can see it. And depending on what you feel like doing, there are a few great anchorages in this part of the sound. Well, they're not anchorages all. Marinas, yeah. So one of them is Gig Harbor. We really like it there. And it was a relief to see the fog starting to lift as a lot of other vessels started to appear on the AIS and radar as we approached the entrance to Gig Harbor.
And this is the entrance to the harbor. It's a great all-weather anchorage. And it's so well hidden that apparently European explorers went up and down Puget Sound for many years before stumbling upon it. With good anchorage, secure marinas, a harbor museum, several microbreweries, an array of ethnic restaurants, bakeries, and cafes, it's a great place to spend 2 or 3 days. And it can be a busy place on long weekends with lots of boats on short scope, but the holding there is good. The public pier has a dinghy dock for access to shore.
Then we cross over to visit the Thea Foss waterway down there at the bottom, which is actually in downtown Tacoma. There's no anchoring there, but there are lots of places to tie up. I found that Tacoma was really a pleasant surprise.
Yeah. Here we are at the Seaport Museum Float in Tacoma, one of several docks there offering transient moorage. We were surprised at how few boats we saw here, even in the middle of the summer.
They were all up in Desolation Sound. Okay, this is you.
This is me. Esplanade runs the length of the waterfront with restaurants, about 6 museums, and this herb garden planted by liveaboards at the Foss Harbor Marina. And this glass museum is one of the city's big attractions. Apparently it's famous. It was hard to resist this Kodak moment with a full moon and Mount Rainier. You will notice, if you haven't by now, that Mount Rainier appears in a lot of our photographs.
So to the west, towards Point Defiance, is Old Town Dock, which offers free daytime moorage and a popular seafood diner. And there's lots of other shops and restaurants that stretch about a mile or so north. And a couple of miles away is Point Defiance Park, which has 2 marinas and a park with some lovely hiking. And a zoo and aquarium. And also some lovely gardens, beach walks.
And moving on to Tacoma Narrows and into what is known as the South Sound. This is Cutts Island off Kopachuk State Park. There are park mooring buoys here. You can walk the island and explore the area by dinghy or kayak. And it's warm enough to swim. It's one of our favorite anchorages in this area of the sound. Lynn and I grew up on the lakes of northwestern Ontario. Our parents had cottages there. The South Sound reminds me of the lake country. Cottages lining the shore, small power boats out front. Often, though not when I took this photo, the beach here is thick with teenagers on paddle boards or jet skis, bikinis, and boys doing their best to impress. Today, the long split was thick only with seals. They're protected, so you have to keep your distance. It's a short but pretty walk around the island with clay cliffs and sand beaches. That's us on the mooring ball. For many visiting boaters, the real attraction is not seals, it's not teenagers, and it's not swimming.
It's the nearby Island View Public House, tucked up a tidal creek bed just a short paddle away from Cutts Island. And I thought this table that looked like a dock was kind of fun with the cleats to hang your purse from. A thoroughly pleasant afternoon is had relaxing on the deck with locals. And that bay that you see in the background there is also a splendid anchorage that we have used in the past.
And nearby is Penrose Point State Park with mooring buoys and some lovely walks. And the shoreline here is really pretty. And this is your view if you take a mooring ball off the East Beach. Mountain Rainier in the background. In season, it's a busy place for shellfish harvesting. And no matter where you're from, don't eat the seaweed.
And moving deeper into the Sound is Felucci Bay with the Long Branch Marina, which is a favorite with cruisers. Pushing on, we reach the western half of the South Sound. This is McMicken Island State Park in Case Inlet, another lovely sand spit. It's calm and a really lovely spot to dinghy your kayak around. And you'll definitely feel more secluded here than you do in other parts of Puget Sound, like Gerald Cove.
Gerald Cove on Harstein Island, it's a popular spot. The tiny cove has about a dozen mooring balls and 2 park docks that mostly fill up every evening in the summer. This is one of the 2 docks. We played horseshoes at the campground nearby and walked the park trails and had hot showers. And it was calm, so I was able to add yet 7 more steps. Other stops in the South Sound include Tommy State Park with miles of trails and a massive drying shore, and Vaughan Bay, which has great protection from sand spit, which can only be entered at higher water. And there's also Stretch Point, a marine park with mooring buoys and a lovely small marina nearby.
And this is Woodward Bay Conservation Area, which is a 600-acre bird and wildlife refuge. There's 5 miles of mostly undeveloped shoreline and a large colony of bats that reside in that old railroad pier that you see there. So there's a lot of walkable shore, which, you know, there's not a lot of that in the Broughtons. Okay, let's move south to Olympia, the capital of Washington, which is at the very bottom of this map. This chartlet shows the layout. There's the West Bay and the East Bay divided by a small peninsula, and it's all walking distance.
This is the Port Plaza dock in the West Bay. It's sometimes reserved for larger groups, but as you can see, we had our choice of where to tie up. We're behind the same ship that we shared dock space with in Tacoma. A block away is the farmer's market, open 6 days a week. Locally sourced meats, cheeses, bread, everything. It's a great place to stock up. And then stroll the West Bay waterfront.
Which has a dot of statues.
Lots. with restaurants and shops along the way.
Here's a view looking up West Bay on a stormy day. And this is Swantown Marina in East Bay. A big marina, very clean and well kept. That's where you have to go to do your laundry. And these are the transient docks. So there you are in the middle of August. As you can see, there's lots of room for visitors because they're all in Desolation Sound.
This is the state capitol building. You can walk up the hill to. And once there, this is the view you see back to the harbor and West Bay beyond.
So leaving Olympia, not far away is Hope Island, a marine park with mooring balls and miles of walking trails. It's really lovely. And it's known to be a good place for harvesting shellfish in season. So there you can see Hope Island near the center of the map. It's also quite close to the entrance to Hammersley Inlet. So at the end of the inlet is Shelton, which is the farthest west that you can venture in the South Sound.
If you have the time and feel like exploring, Hammersley Inlet is a cool detour. It's narrow, 7-mile channel, best taken with the flow, which can reach 5 knots. Anyone with experience reading charts should have no problem, though we almost went aground paying more attention to the view than maybe we should have. It's an interesting cruise with stylish homes along both shores and the tidal flats busy with oyster farming, as you can see here. We anchored off the port of Shelton Marina at the head of the inlet. It now belongs to the Shelton Yacht Club. I know.
Okay, well, don't worry about it.
Mixed up.
You just keep going here.
Yeah. Shelton is a small town where lumber is king. It calls itself the Christmas tree capital of the U.S. There's a secondhand shop, a few restaurants, a Safeway. It was hot when we were here, so as a highlight, Lynn took a time out at the local Dairy Queen.
Somehow we got off track here. Okay. Okay, so yeah, talking about ice cream. Another treat that's not available in Desolation Sound, I might add. But this is interesting. We contact marinas every year to update our guides and ask if there's anything that they want to add to the information in their listing. And the number one thing that they ask us to add, if there's space, is that they sell ice cream.
Anyway, we mentioned that the South Sound reminds us of Northwestern Ontario. A mill town like Shelton would fit right in.
On the way out the next morning, on the ebb tide, we proceeded quickly back out the inlet until this thick fog started rolling up the inlet towards us. So we just dropped the anchor for a while and waited for it to lift. Okay, so now we'll jump back north of Seattle to Whidbey Island. Rather than turning west and going to up Admiralty Inlet, we'll turn easterly into Possession Sound for a stop at Everett. This is a stock photo of the Everett Harbor. The bottom 2/3 of the photo is the Navy Yards, and just above that, off the channel, is the largest public marina on the west coast of the United States, which is protected by that skinny little wisp of sand that you see, which is known as Jetty Island.
The channel past Everett Marina is actually the mouth of a river. It looks peaceful, but it can be a real challenge to tie up when the tidal current nears peak flow. There are slips for more than 2,000 boats, with restaurants, a distillery, convenience store, and 2 chandleries.
And look, we're like the only people there. So there's lots of traffic in that channel. We were there during a fishing derby, and it was just a constant stream of boats coming and going throughout the day. And it's breezy there most afternoons. So it's a favorite place for windsurfing, kiteboarding, and parasailing.
And not far away is Holmes Harbor. There's a public dock there at Freeland with provisioning and other services in the town a short walk away.
So moving north is Oak Harbor, a great anchorage and a friendly marina. The only thing is the base there where the fighter pilots are trained is not too far away, and the growl of jets taking off and landing can be pretty intrusive.
And it was a great place to finally finish off those steps. Able to get to the top of the mast.
That was a good project.
Yeah.
So this is Deception Pass. So this is your one way out of Puget Sound. It's narrow and really fast flows, so you definitely want to take that one at slack tide, as just about everyone else does. So yeah, it can be busy.
An alternate route is north through Swinomish Channel toward La Conner and eventually Anacortes. You just have to time it to go with the flow. And timing the current can be tricky, but that's part of the fun. Transiting the channel requires some care, though most of the way, deep draft boats should have no problem as long as they stay in the middle. And anchoring is not permitted in La Conner, but there's lots of transient space at the marina and several town docks. It's a nice town to visit for a day or two with museums, galleries, vineyards for wine tasting, and it has a good sized marina for provisioning.
Oh, grocery store.
Grocery store. Mm-hmm. Marina for grocery store for provisions, yeah.
Okay, so heading north, once past the swinging railroad bridge that is usually open unless a train is expected, you just have to follow the navigation buoys to the waters around Anacortes. And finally, arriving in Anacortes, there are both anchorage and marina options, as well as chandleries and marine services, although the anchoring options are in good weather only.
And that's our look at Puget Sound. For us, the hardest part was deciding what to include in a short talk, but we hope we gave you an idea of what a pleasant cruising holiday Puget Sound can be.
Hopefully, it won't be too long before we can cross the border again and experience the delights of cruising in Puget Sound and taking advantage of all that it has to offer.